All right, now we're going to look at laminating, and this is what you're going to do on one half of your little mini corset pieces. Laminating does a couple of things. One, it holds the layers together and makes them stronger and stiffer. And two, it outlines the bone casings and actually creates the bone casings. So I'm going to start in the middle of my piece. On a small piece it's not too bad, but on bigger corset pieces you want to start in the center and work your way out. So I'm just going to stitch down the lines first, and then we'll look at actually laminating between the lines. So stitch right on top of your basting line that you created. I've pinned these together with a few pins. You don't want to distort the fabric by pinning tons. Just enough to hold it, and you're going to use your hands as your tools to hold things. Now just like before, I'm going to make a turn and come right back up. Right on those lines. I get lots of big thread out of the way, otherwise it becomes part of the laminating. And I'm coming right off the ends again. Then I'm going to go over to the next bone casing. Stitch right on top of that basting line. Then I'll go over and do the other side. And so I have, if you look on the other side of the piece, I've outlined all the outside lines. Okay. So that's making my bone casings with the two layers. Now I'm going to laminate. The trick with laminating is you don't want to be too far apart or too close, if that makes any sense. You're looking at least a big 1/8 of an inch. No more than that. If you get into 1/4 of an inch, there's no point. The idea for laminating is to make your fabric as one. So again, I go right off the edge and come back, and you follow the contour of the lines you've drawn. After a while, you start to figure out what makes sense. You can actually use the laminating to shape the fabric, so you can make the fabric curve, much the same as you do in tailoring with the diagonal baste to mold your collar. You can do that with the sewing machine as well. Anyway, we're going to go up between the bone casings here, so you want to make sure you're pretty clear about what your bone casings are so you don't accidentally shut those. And it's just 1/8 of an inch parallel to the line. And you want to aim for beautiful, so use your foot as a guide. I'm just going to snip these stitches off. And after some practice, you get used to how far to space things, what makes sense. And I'm just going to do a little triangle at the top here to fill that in. So there I have laminated those two pieces together between the bones. You don't laminate in the seam allowance, alright? There's no reason to do that, and in fact you want to be able to trim your seam allowance. So you only laminate between the bone casings and the actual stitch lines. Now this set here is going to be a little bit tricky, but what happens is you come down and turn around and come back, and eventually you end up doing a little triangle like this. So I'll do that so you can see that. I always start with a straight. Come back down. get rid of those long threads. Alright, and now I can start doing a little triangle. And this is where having the knee pedal is a big help. As you can see, it's a lot of up and down. And that's laminated. So you end up with some little triangular laminates. So that's laminating, and if you look on the right side, there's no pencil marks on the wrong side, and it looks quite tidy on the right side. Then you go and you give this a press so it's nice and flat. Then you will go across the bottom lines, but you have to skip those bone casings. So again, I start right at the edge, I'm right on my line, and I'm going to stop at the bone casing, and I'm going to pull it forward and skip it, stitch between, and then skip it. If you don't do that, you're closing off the bone casing and you won't be able to put the bone in there. So if you look on the right side, you can see that I've skipped the bone casing. And you don't have to trim that thread off, you can leave it there for the moment. So that's laminating. End to end, about 1/8 of an inch apart, just between the bone casings and your stitch lines. You don't laminate in the seam allowance, okay? No need to do that. In fact, it'll get in your way. So that's laminating. Give it a press, and then you're going to take it to the table and find your pattern piece and check against the piece to ensure that it hasn't shrunk up in the laminating. That happens actually quite a bit on bigger pieces because there's lots more stitching and a lot more laminating going on. So it ends up pulling up a little bit. If that's the case, in this case it is a little bit shorter. I can show you that when I hold it up. This is... Now my fabric's a little bit shorter, you can see the end line. You redraw the line and unpick the old one, redraw it, and restitch it. This isn't unusual. That's why you check it, because you want to make sure that the piece hasn't changed. That means your corset's changed. And it's usually lengthwise. Once in a blue moon, it'll ease it up widthwise too. So you better check that. That's it for lamination.